Today, anatomy is an important part of most yoga teachers' trainings. But does the knowledge of anatomy necessarily mean safety on the mat? In this fourth episode of the Wise Way to Yoga podcast, Cecile and I discuss how detailed anatomical descriptions during class does not necessarily mean a pain or injury-free practice, and how it can actually lead us to mind-body disconnection. Cecile is an Alexander Technique teacher, certified by the American Society of Teachers of the Alexander Technique. Cecile has been practicing in the Boston area for over 20 years. She has also trained as a Thai yoga therapist and is the author of the book, The Wise Way to Yoga, our main inspiration and base for this podcast. And I, Mona Kelly, am a yoga teacher, certified in Vinyasa, Kundalini and Restorative Yoga. Also a student of Cecile, my yoga classes, taught exclusively online, integrate the Alexander Technique principles for a fluid, fun, and safe yoga practice. I also consult on Vedic astrology, one of the most profound self-knowledge tools, in my humble opinion. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Wise Way to Yoga podcast. Hello, Cecile, and welcome to episode number 4 of the Wise Way to Yoga podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mona.
Great. So a little recap from the previous episode. So in our last episode, we talked about the fact that gentle yoga is not always enough to stay safe. And also we talked about the difference between listening to whether your body feels good or hurt and listening to your whole body intelligence, which we talked about is key to optimal safety when practicing yoga. So we don't hear a lot about the whole body intelligence, but what we hear a lot in yoga classes, at least in my experience, is the mind-body connection. But I feel that it is more intellectual than experiential, mostly because teachers are talking about mind-body connection, but then they're talking a lot about anatomy, which can be confusing for students. It was for me until I experienced your work. So my question is, what's the relationship between mind-body connection and anatomy? And is the knowledge of anatomy necessary to teach or practice yoga in a safe way?
So first of all, people talk about the mind-body connection as if they were two separate things and there was a little bridge in between. Mm-hmm. But the truth is the mind and body are the two sides of the same coin. So really, they are not really separate. That's one thing I wanted to say. The second thing is that anatomy is definitely an intellectual concept.
Yes, very much so.
And so the initial yoga was about mind, body, and soul. And so there's a lot of confusion in the yoga world, and people mix and match different concepts without really embodying what they're talking about. So yes, they've heard that yoga is about connecting mind, body, and soul, and they're going to talk about the mind-body connection, but then the way they use their bodies and the way they give instructions to students, although sometimes it can be helpful, I'm not saying it's never helpful, but it encourages students to stay in their mind, in their head, and to try to use their mind to control their bodies. And that in itself actually disconnect them from their whole body intelligence guidance. When you step out of your own way by not being in your intellect, that's when you can actually listen to the guidance of your body. And there are some, in my way of working, I teach people what it means to release in their joints, because that's one way you can activate your whole body intelligence. And when you actually activate your whole body intelligence, let's say you release the hip joint socket, your spine lengthens on its own with no muscle effort. It's actually, when you see it happen, it's pretty clear and drastic and amazing.
Yeah, I've experienced that, especially, doing downward dog position and things like that.
And just sitting in a lotus position or anything. So, which again, you can bring to your sitting at the computer and all of that. So I think that, and that's why there's an epidemic of people thinking that sitting upright in a pose or at the computer has to do with lifting your upper back and upper chest. But this is neither comfortable nor natural. So 30 seconds later, people collapse down. And when they hold it, because they're in yoga and they think lengthening the spine is required, then they're actually holding tension instead of letting the body soften into a state of expansion. Mm-hmm. So that's where there's a bit of a gray area. I think that increasingly, we are a society that focuses on the intellect. We are disconnected from the neck down. And we think that because we go to yoga class or we go to the gym or that we're in our bodies. And yes, we are more in our bodies than if we just sit in front of the computer all day, for sure. But there is different level of awareness, and the awareness of a muscle tensing or a muscle stretching, that's a primitive, actually, a very primitive level of awareness, which of course you have to start someplace. But when you understand it on you have the bigger picture, you realize that it's not enough to be aware of the sensation of your muscle tensing or stretching. It's not enough to make sure that you're feeling pain or not. You can benefit from yoga way, way more if you actually allow your body to direct how the pose should be for you. And when you do that, then you should feel energy flowing. And it's not your mind that says, let's the energy flow. That's still a concept that doesn't necessarily happen in the body when you just say it like that. But when you know how to do it that way, you really feel the energy flowing. And to conclude on this part is that my experience of a lot of yoga classes I took is that it's more about positioning, holding, controlling, and all those things are actually preventing the energy to flow. And so we're not really getting the maximum we could from our yoga practice. It's not to say we're not getting anything. And that's where it's confusing, because people still get some benefits. So then they're like, oh yeah, since I do yoga, blah, blah, blah. But they're not aware that, yes, they're getting those benefits, but they're also reinforcing habitual pattern that they have off the mat. They're also maybe creating excess tension when they're strengthening, even though they get rid of some of it when they stretch. So this wise way to yoga is really a new way to approach movement, so that you do the poses in an integrated way so that the energy can flow. And that's how you know that you're doing an integrated pose, if you feel the energy flowing through the pose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I actually had a lot of thoughts coming through. One of them was in one of the yoga classes I went to. Some teachers can be very, very specific on their anatomy directions. One of my classes, I heard press your shin bones against the back wall, which was quite creative and interesting, but it certainly doesn't help to tap into your whole body intelligence and let your body flow and really experience that connection. And I also, so that's the first thing I wanted to mention, is that some anatomical descriptions are, I'm sorry to say, but off the chart and a bit ridiculous. And I want to advise people not to listen to those things, or at least if they can't figure out how to press their shin bones against the wall, that they shouldn't feel too bad about it. But there's another thing that I learned working with you, is that when you're moving, I'd love to give some tips to our listeners. And I know one of the tips that I always keep in mind is that when I'm moving, if I feel that there's one body part, one muscle that is screaming, I'm not tapping into my whole body intelligence. It's more body parts that I'm using rather than really being in sort of flow. So maybe you can elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah. So yes, what has happened since the 19th century and the beginning of modern fitness, including yoga, is that we started, you could say, on the wrong foot, because from the very beginning it was all about body parts. And interestingly enough, the reason there was the beginning of modern fitness is because some people discovered the beautiful body of the Olympic athletes and noticed how they had very beautiful bodies, and they wanted to look like that. But they didn't go and investigate to find out how did they get there. They assumed that they were pumping every muscle. But in truth, those athletes were always engaging their whole body in activities, and they were trained in other, poetry and math and spirituality. And
yeah, we talked about that. They had a holistic.
They had a holistic approach to it. But the gymnasts of the 19th century did not know that and started their own way, which had to do with body parts. So, what they encourage is to, so for example, when you do chair pose, they get you way off balance, so your quads start screaming. And unfortunately, yes, you will build up some strength in your quads, but you will also build up a lot of excess tension that's unnecessary, not just in your quads, but in other parts of your body that are not happy about this situation. And you constantly put yourself in stress mode. Yoga is for you to be more relaxed and access more peace and more well-being. So doing poses that puts you in stress mode is not helping you. And when you let those body parts scream, like I say, and like you say, yes, it's a sign that you've already disconnected from your whole body intelligence. Therefore, there's no flow. Therefore, the average teacher or practitioner that I know, when I tell them, let's do a chair pose, they're like, no. A lot of people don't like it because the way it's taught is it disconnects them from their whole body intelligence, and they can sense that, but they couldn't put it into words that way. So that's why I'm going to give a tip to the listeners.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you.
I'm going to say, when you do a chair pose, for example, do not try to bring your weight above your heels. I know your teacher might say that, but you don't have to listen to everything your teacher says. If you understand it more deeply, then take care of yourself. You're responsible for yourself. Always try to make sure you're balanced above your whole foot, regardless of the pose you're doing, your whole foot or your hand and foot or whatever is connected with the ground. Always release into those support and always stay balanced above those. And already you're gonna be working more with your whole body intelligence when you do that. So
that's a great tip. So instead of favoring the back of the foot, like the heel, instead you really want to use your entire foot, right? You want to have
and you don't even have to force the foot to spread or anything. If you just bring your weight above your whole feet, they will spread organically.
Absolutely. And I've experienced that.
Yeah, it's and that brings another thing. I've had yoga teachers when I was teaching the online course live. I had teachers who said, I keep struggling with my toes going up. Yeah, the toes going up is when you're going way too far on your heels and your body starts complaining. So your toes going off the ground when you're going too far on your heels is a signal that you need to pay attention to. But then a lot of yoga teachers, for some reason, I don't know how it got started, they think that lifting your toes off the ground, even in other situations, is a good thing. It is not a good thing. It disconnects you from your whole body intelligence. So I don't recommend that. And talking about toes, I don't recommend most of the poses where they make you go on your toes or on the tip of your fingers. All of those are actually harmful to the body, and I really discourage people to do those.
Yeah, and they're going against grounding.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, which
exactly
doesn't make a lot of sense. But and the other thing also in chair pose, a lot of teachers also ask you to use blocks between your thighs and to squeeze the blocks. So do you have anything to say about this, like another little tip?
Yeah, absolutely. So the block between the legs, I don't object to that if they want to do that. However, the concept of squeezing the block is the problem. So you can have a block between your legs just to keep your leg parallel if that's what you want. I would use a big block, but you still want to release through your let your weight be above all your feet. And for that to happen, you cannot squeeze the block. You can think of hugging. Let your bones hug the block and see how that feels. The language, and that'll be a topic in another podcast,
absolutely.
But how you use language will help you either disconnect, will make you disconnect from your whole body intelligence, or will help you work with it.
Absolutely.
And that's the distinction I make. Hug the block with your legs, don't squeeze it.
It's a lot more gentle. I know that's what I'm using. I'm not a big fan of using blocks in general, but when I do, that's what I think about.
Yeah, I don't mind blocks. I think there are lots of poses because I have short arms that help me.
No.
In
that sense, props, absolutely, at props.
But in that case, it, for whatever reason, if they want to use a block, at least do it by hugging. And it's not just because it's more gentle, but it's because the minute you hug the block, with the idea of hugging the block with your bones, connects you with your skeleton, your whole skeleton. It connects you to the ground under your feet, and it helps you not overdo the muscles. But I can promise you, even if you're in a chair pose and you're releasing and you're just hugging the block, you will still strengthen, but you're going to develop what I call flexible strength instead of stiff strength.
Yeah.
That's another concept, distinction that I make, which is really important. And people...
And it's so important that I think, because people start yoga because they want to get more flexible.
Exactly.
But they develop stiffness.
Exactly.
And as a result of some misconceptions. So
exactly.
So I think the key idea for today is that anatomy has its place, but if it's too intellectual, it can really take you away from connecting with your whole body intelligence. And
it is intellectual. It's not that if it becomes intellectual. Anatomy is an intellectual concept, and therefore it's fine to study it off the mat, but leave it there. If you're interested in understanding things or whatever, that's fine. But when you're on the mat, don't think too much anatomy, because it disconnects you from your whole body intelligence.
No, absolutely. And because a yoga teacher is an anatomy nerd and knows a lot about it, doesn't mean it's a great teacher that will help you develop whole body intelligence and flow when you practice. So I think that's one of the key takeaway for today. Now that we've concluded, I just want to remind our listeners where they can find you, Cecile. So your website, I will put all the links in the description below, obviously, but if you want to also spell it out, that would be perfect.
So actually, as I mentioned earlier, I have a new website still being worked on, but it's we can access it now, and it connects people to all the other, my blog and all the other things they need, and that is www.cecilerayner.com. So it's very easy to
okay.
remember.
So CECILERAYNOR.
Yes.
.com. NOR.com.
Yes. Exactly. So that's one way. And then if they want to read ahead on this, this podcast series is kind of following my book. So if they are interested in what I'm saying, they can also go to to Amazon and buy The Wise Way to Yoga book.
So The Wise Way to Yoga book by
Yeah.
Cecile Rayner on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm. And very, very, very soon, hopefully in the next few weeks, I will also be launching an online course, which will also be the Wise Way to Yoga online solo course. And that's another way that they can learn in a more practical way. I'm very excited about launching this.
Great.
And as we keep doing the podcast, I'll let people know when it's launched. But of course, it'll be on my website when that happens.
So everything will be centralized on Cecile's website, and same with me. You can find me on monakelly.net, MONAKELLY.net, where you can find the links to this podcast, but also to my YouTube channel, BodyPurpose. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more yoga videos like this. For questions, or if you would like to ask for a specific class, please comment below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon.